You're listening to the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram.
So now that's the talking about yourself bit done, Mary. Let's get into this cricket discussion. I chose some topics to talk about and discuss today. The first one is about women's cricket in general. Mary, women's cricket's come a long way since the early days, since the pioneers first started, back in the old days, the 30s until now, when women started playing test matches and branched into ODIs and T20s now, and the game's growing around the world, which is fantastic. Many young girls taking up the game here in Australia, and I'm guessing in Ireland as well. Good to see young girls take up the game. Many people watching women's cricket around the world. The T20 World Cup final was an example of that in 2020 between Australia and India, the final. And that showed that people are invested in women's cricket. That crowd was 86,174 people watched that game. Who would have thought that amount of people will watch a women's game compared to back in the old days where a man and his dog was only at the ground, essentially. We are seeing very talented and skilled women cricketers in the game. But Mary, women's cricket has a long way to go. And there's many barriers facing the women's game today. Since you started playing cricket, what have been the big changes in women's cricket from when you started to now?
Well, I think just the support around the game. I know certainly in Irish terms, we wouldn't have necessarily had physio support, gym support, that kind of stuff. And now we have full-time physio, we've got full-time gym. Well, although we're not available full-time, but hopefully full-time contracts will be around the corner for us. But I think that support around players, it has definitely grown. And I know I mentioned to you chatting earlier, certainly for Ireland, when I first started playing, I used to have to explain what cricket was to people. And now I don't. So that kind of notoriety about the game is becoming more popular, is a massive shift in Ireland, because it's just, the more people know about the game, the more support it'll get, the more we'll get from the government and Sport Ireland and stuff like that. So that's a big difference for us. Numbers playing wise, I'm not sure exactly. I should probably know that statistic, but it's definitely growing, and there's a lot more women's teams popping up in different clubs around Ireland, which is great. Overall, yeah, I guess it's a funny one. If with the MCG, I actually was there. It was amazing. And I've been to the MCG plenty of times. I saw Warney get his 700th wicket. And been there for the Boxing Day Test matches. So I'm very fortunate. But like the feeling of walking up with my friends, and just the buzz around and going, this is a women's final, like that was unbelievable. I have to say it was such a proud moment. I'm getting a bit emotional here, but I feel like you're like, who would have thought it? And I was like, actually, a lot of people would have thought it, but nobody in a decision making role ever thought it. The kind of way. So I'm so, like, Cricket Australia are brilliant in what they do in terms of supporting the women. Like, it's not equal by any chance, but it's a different road for women and men. It's just a different beast, basically. But it's definitely very well supported, and certainly with the domestic contracts and stuff like that, it helps as well with the international contracts alongside. But even the things they do, like, they say international men's cricket, international women's cricket. It's not cricket and women's cricket, and they were a real world leader in that respect. So I think they really started the ball rolling, and other countries are following. So that's been a massive shift, and I'm not surprised that there was that many people there. To be honest, like it was, like it's such a good, like, watching Australia play. Once you're not on the receiving end of it, it's great to watch.
Absolutely, they are the dominant force in women's cricket at the moment, and they probably are the favourites to win 50 over World Cup next month in New Zealand.
Yeah, I actually umpired in an under-18 championship a few years ago, and I was like, oh my god, because I was like, you can see the talent in the pathway, and you're like, the churning machine is well and truly oiled. They're unbelievable.
Absolutely. You touched on a little bit there about the comparisons. Does that frustrate you? Should we compare men's and women's sports in general, but in cricket, we do that all the time, where, this is not as good as the men's game, for example, because we're so used to watching men's cricket. And probably those people are not invested in women's cricket and don't see that women cricketers are very skilled, talented, they know what they're doing, but it's never going to be the same as the men's game. It's the same game, but played differently in two different ways. Does that frustrate you as a female cricketer when you hear about those comparisons at all?
Yeah, it is frustrating. I think the world is changing a little bit and going, but it's all about that education piece. It's like, how on earth do you expect it to be the same when women are professional, 5 minutes, and men have been professional, for the last however long. Even if the men weren't professional, they were getting coaching in their club. They were playing on good wickets. Even now we struggle to play on good wickets and stuff like that. So it's never going to be like for like until we've played professionally for the last 50 years on good pitches and had top quality coaches. So, and I think that goes for all sports really. Obviously the physiological makeup of men and women are naturally different. So there's always going to be differences. But I think the more educated people get in the general public, the less it happens. And even like commentators, they might say, although her actions like Brett Lee's and stuff like that. And that's, it's making it relevant for people and going, oh yeah, it's not just, a women's game, it's actually a cricket game. So sometimes a comparison can be good and be helpful, but I think when it's, if people are criticizing it, saying it's not the same game, that's not really, that's not helpful either in terms of, well, we're potentially not going to hit sixes on a 80-meter boundary, are we? But in another 5 years, after another 5 years of gymming and stuff like that, we certainly might be able to. But it can be frustrating, but also I can see where they're coming from as well. It happens in all sports. Like I think eventually, because certainly in sports like rugby, where it's all just pure power now with the men's with men's teams, and you can see the women's teams have to have a little bit more skill and tactics. So I think actually slowly the women's game will start taking over in many sports where it's just too much about power in men's sports.
Absolutely. Women test matches, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
They're becoming more scarcer these days. And we saw an amazing test match recently in Canberra for the Women's Ashes, and that went down to the wire. And for those who are wondering, I wrote an article about that on our blog page for the podcast, outlining the future for women's test matches, and I believe there is a future for it. But at the moment, it's not going anywhere. Only 3 countries, potentially 4, will play it. South Africa are going to play a test against England in their summer this year. Australia and England, India play it in a multi-format series. That's the best way to incorporate a test match. Mary, the women's team for Ireland, they played a test match in 2000.
Yes, before the men, yes.
Yes, they did. And the men, 17 years later, got that chance in 2017, which was a proud moment.
You can imagine the steam coming out my ears when everyone was like, it's the first test match. And I was like, no, it wasn't.
No, that is incorrect. The women played the first in 2000.
Yeah.
And that was their only test, by the way, and that's it. So, Mary, would you like to see more women's test matches being played? And does the team and yourself think about playing test matches?
To be honest, for ourselves, we just want more fixtures. That's always our go-to with Cricket Ireland every year. We're when we're looking to improve, we'll just take more fixtures. So absolutely, we'd take a test match for sure. I've always said I'd love to play. My batting style is probably suited to it a bit, but obviously just the nature of it and testing yourself over those 4 days, not 5, but it would be brilliant. But it's not our priority for Ireland, but absolutely I would love to see more test matches playing. And I've had this discussion actually the other day with a guy, and I think potentially the lack of it has to do with the lack of professionalism in the women's game as well. Like if you only get girls off annual leave for 2 weeks, you might get 5 ODIs and 3 T20s, or 1 test match and do it so actually it's probably been maximizing the time, where I think now with the teams being more professional and available more, we'll start to see more test matches. And look, there's boring men's test matches out there. They happen all the time. So there's no harm in having a boring women's test match every now and again either. The other small issue with that is that domestic women's cricket, there's no longer format. We don't play anything longer than 50 over cricket. So it will take it's just naturally going to be more difficult for people to bat. Like Elise Perry's a freak, like scoring Heather Knight and stuff like that. They're unbelievable cricketers who can turn it around in Test match cricket, and they unless they've played men's cricket, they won't have played anything longer than a 50 over game. So they're just unbelievable cricketers. But it does to go to that and change, and then obviously that's another comparison. It's like, well, it's not like the men's, and it's like, well, again, different products, different backgrounds of the players. You've got to give it time, but absolutely, and you learn way more about cricket as well, in those longer format games, and you get more of a chance to express yourself and hone your skills. But yeah, no, definitely, I'll be keen for longer formats for sure.
Absolutely, and I'm guessing the women love playing ODIs and T20s because you're playing cricket, but you would like to do something different for a change rather than just play ODIs and T20s all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it is no different. Like we grow up. Well, I'm saying we grow up. I was a fully fledged adult, but people grow up and they know Test cricket's the pinnacle, but we actually aren't ever given the opportunity to play it. So it's no different. People, like men and women, aren't different in that respect. They want to reach the top of the game. We're all competitive beasts. So not being given that option is always it's always hard. So yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't you want anything different? Yeah,
absolutely. If the ICC are listening, get your skates on. The ball is in your court, ICC.
Yeah.
Every cricket nation, let's have a discussion and get it done, because people want to see Test series and they want to see more women's Test matches. Let's hope in the future that will happen, and that will be a glorious day when it does.
That's it, yeah.
We mentioned this earlier about full-time and part-time professionals. Is women's cricket a level playing field at the moment, Mary? Because you have teams who are miles ahead of everyone else, like Australia, England, India, and then you have teams like Ireland, all those lower-ranked teams down below, sort of like men's cricket in a way. But some countries have full-time players, others have part-time players, and those players who are part-time are often doing study or looking at other ways to make a living and support themselves in life, which is important, obviously. And then some players are leaving cricket in the women's game because they love playing cricket, but it's not a viable or sustainable option for me going long-term. I have to do something else. So it's sort of like the old days, like in men's cricket where you're getting paid peanuts for playing a Test match, for example. It's sort of like that in the women's game at the moment, because you're not professional, you're not training all year, you're training part of the year, and then the quality goes in the game. So
yeah,
is it there at the moment, the way it's happening at the moment, or do you think more can be done on this?
Look, I think there's always more can be done, but I think it's definitely in a good place. Although I did see a tweet recently about the Indian women not being paid. Now, potentially they are, and it's just not publicly announced. But like stuff like that from one of the top boards in the world is pretty disappointing to see. Their contracts only went till the end of the year, I think, and are obviously in a new cycle now. So, and obviously things like the IPL, and you're like, that's just screaming. Like even the top male players or ex-male players are shouting for that, and that's really good support for the women's game. So stuff like that is kind of, it's frustrating, and you're like, there's so much scope for growth there. But at the same time, there's teams like for example, Thailand, they made their players fully professional, and look how much they've come on in the few years. And it's all about growing the game in countries like Thailand, because they're never going to have the same kind of player base as they would in like England or Australia until it becomes a mainstream sport.
Hi everyone, hope you enjoyed my discussion on women's cricket with Mary Waldron. What's your favourite thing about women's cricket? Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get the latest episodes of the podcast, and like and share our Facebook page, and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Also, the podcast is now available on Anchor, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.